Scott Dochterman. 𝗙𝗃𝗍𝗶𝗹. Together on one pod, talking odds and all things Big Ten. Powered by GameDay Men's Health, with locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, and North Liberty. From the Channel Seed Studios, this is Legends and Listeners. Exclusively on Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere. It is Legends and Listeners on this Thursday morning from the Channel Seed Studios and only on the Iowa Everywhere Network. Leistikow here of the Des Moines Register, joined by co-host Scott Dochterman of The Athletic. Happy to be joining you for our 59th episode together, Scott. I know you especially appreciate the history of the Iowa-Minnesota matchup. And you were up in Minneapolis recently, so you're kind of our Iowa-Minnesota expert this week.
I love this series, Chad. This is probably my favorite one. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but the history of this rivalry and this wonderful trophy, I have a little miniature figure here of Floyd. It's the best traveling trophy in college football, if not in college or any kind of sport. And this series has so many markers through the past. And even in the recent past, you think about the last few years where we've had last year's Cooper DeJean situation. You had Jack Campbell getting a touchdown called back for craziness in sub-zero wind chill weather. You think about leave the timeouts, take the pig, leave the gun, take the cannolis, and on from Brian Ferentz pounding on the replay official's door. This is just in recent years, let alone
17, right?
Yeah, 17.
Yeah.
Iowa upsetting a top 10 undefeated Minnesota in 19. You think about, but then, going all the way back to the Floyd incident in 34 and 35. This has been a white hot series. There's been so much here with this. And then 1960, the greatest game nobody ever talks about, number 1 Iowa versus number 2/3 Minnesota. First major game with 2 black quarterbacks starting. It's really impressive. So I think this series is underrated, even though it has such a great trophy. And I'm glad to see it's going to get the primetime treatment. Yeah,
6:30 on NBC. I'll throw a couple other little Minneapolis memories in there. Back in 1990, Scott, I was in high school and I traveled up to the Metrodome with my family. We went to the game. It was the last game of the year. It was a terrible performance by Iowa, but they got a bunch of help that day. I can't remember exactly. I was still pretty young, but they ended up tying for the Big Ten title at 6-2 and going to the Rose Bowl that year anyway. But I remember my whole family was just miserable because the Hawks lost. And then all of a sudden you're watching the scoreboard and you're oh, okay, cool. You still wanted to win or whatever. And then, flash forward to 2002, of course, the Hawkeyes cap an 8-0 season, probably Kirk Ferentz's best season, even though, I think they got ranked a little higher in 2009, but 2002 was probably his best team. And to cap it in Minneapolis with the Roses. And of course they didn't get to go to the Rose Bowl in that setting. And then, another one that I remember pretty well is 2008, the 55-0 game. That was one of those, I don't know how many times does that happen in the Ferentz era? Maybe 5 times where they just, I think it was supposed to be a pretty close game, right? And just annihilated them. It almost was like a 55-24 Ohio State game. It was just one of those games where everything goes right. So a lot of memory. Obviously, there's been some tough losses up in Gopherland. The Marcus Coker game comes to mind. I don't know. There's just, it seems like every year there's something significant about this game. It's kind of crazy.
Well, forever, for the better part of almost 30 years, they ended their seasons against one another, or one of them would, and then they would flip things around once Penn State joined. And you think about the 90 game, as you said. They had penalties on Iowa for crowd noise. I mean, that's just
yes, that's right. Yeah.
91. I was talking to Lou Montgomery about this the other day. 91 game was the Snow Bowl there, and we would have been seniors in high school, and there was a big snowstorm before the game, and they won, and that's when Danon Hughes caught a touchdown pass, then dropped it to Snow Angel in the end zone. You think about 98, that was Hayden Fry's last game, and they got blown out of the dome. Yeah,
I covered that game for the Gazette.
Back then. Yeah. 2006, they lost up there on the end of a really bad season, and Kirk broke his foot kicking 𝗺𝗱𝗏𝗄's tail in the locker room at halftime. He was pissed. And in 08, when there was the hijinks that went on in the bathroom at the Metrodome, led to
I couldn't remember what year that was.
That was the last time the Gophers played in the Metrodome, and if I recall, I think it was in the Pioneer Press. I'd have to look, but it was like as the Hawkeyes are scoring off on the field, their fans were scoring off the field. Because of the arrests that happened in the bathroom. There's just so, but you know what? This is what makes college football unique and special. Teams that have, this is the fourth most played rivalry in the Big Ten. This is a series that dates back to the 1890s. They've played it in Cedar Rapids at a baseball field. They've played it, obviously in the Metrodome and outside of Memorial Stadium. They've had people charge after Forrest Evashevsky on the sidelines. They've had fights in the press row between Sid Hartman and Red Peppers. So,
oh my gosh. We need a good press fight this week. We got to bring Morehouse back.
The Roy Kent of Iowa media,
See, that's the best comparison ever.
Yes.
I hope Mark likes that comparison.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty accurate.
I know. I just the second season I just started watching. I just was laughing because I was like, "That is Morehouse! Oh my god!" He's just really. His exterior is so hard, and yet he's somebody sat in his seat at the press conference or something, and then you've got the very soft interior that sometimes he would display at times. So,
sure.
Yeah. So
and this year, Scott, it opens Big Ten play for the Hawkeyes. Pretty rare that happens. It has happened before. 18, right? Didn't they open?
I think that was up there. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, maybe they didn't open with them, but I remember that game vividly. It was 5th game of the year. But here we are, and the question today for our show, Scott, we kind of just figured one topic is probably good, and it'll pretty much carry us. We are going to talk some other Big Ten, by the way. We are kind of for those just tuning in, we're a Hawkeye show, but we're also a Big Ten show, obviously. Legends and Listeners is the title. We're going to get to some Big Ten themes because there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. But our question today is Iowa ready for Big Ten play? That's a pretty wide-ranging question, but there were a lot of high hopes this season. Hasn't gone perfectly, obviously, for the Hawkeyes with a 2-1 non-conference mark. Scott, they've had essentially 6 pretty good quarters of football and 6 not so good and maybe bad quarters of football, so right down the middle. But, before we get into the question I just asked, it's I felt like a lot of people were losing a lot of perspective after the game the other day. This is an annual thing for Hawkeye football, even the good seasons, Scott. Mm-hmm. This is how it goes in September. It's not perfect, and you got to muddle through and win some of these games, and they didn't against Iowa State, and they did in this one against Troy.
You're right. I watched a million games last week because I wasn't at Kinnick, for a change. I was doing our TV rankings of the commentators, but I did, not only watch the game that day, but I rewatched it a couple of times. And the second time through, I was probably less angsty, about it, antsy, I suppose, about everything. they had some mistakes. They had some breakdowns, yes, but they do all the time. I mean, that's really what Iowa football has been and will continue to be under Kirk Ferentz. And if his successor is of his same quality, it'll be the same way then too, which is they're ironing out their issues. They've got issues. They're working on them. You look at, there were a lot of positives. I mean, when your quarterbacks go 20 of 24, that's really good. When you're running for almost 300 yards or whatever, I mean, that's outstanding. Now, you've made some pretty significant mistakes on defense, but I also think they're correctable mistakes. And I look back at like last year, like let's take the Western Michigan game. Yeah, they blew them out 41-10. Not that dissimilar to what ended up happening here, but I gave up a 40-yard pass and a 50-plus yard pass. I mean, so they've had mistakes in this time of year, and then they buckle down and they get better and they grow. And so ultimately, I think it's a gross the way people were tweeting at halftime and lining up on Facebook and stuff. I mean, it was like the Kirk Ferentz era is over and all this stuff. I'm like, Jesus, they came back and they won by 17 points. I mean, did you really think they weren't? I mean, it's like, just relax, man. If they lose to Minnesota, freak out. But, let's wait till the end of the game before you start, wanting to throw stones at the guy.
Yeah. And I just go back to 2021 as well, because that was a season where Iowa rose to number 2 in the national rankings halfway through the season. So, a person could say, see, that it's not always like this, sometimes, but just go back to the 4th game against Colorado State. They were down 14-7 at halftime against offensive coordinator John Budmeyer. That was not a pretty game. And I'm looking at the box score right now. Both teams had 12 first downs. They both were under 300 yards of offense. It was an ugly game, They had to claw that one out too. And the Iowa State game that year, yeah, they won it, but they had 173 yards of offense. And Nick DeYoung and Jack Plum couldn't block anybody. Yeah. There were major problems with that team that some wins kind of glossed over. And that's kind of where I think we're just at the normal spot with Iowa. They just didn't get the win against Iowa State, which I know sucks for most of you listening to this, but it's, in my opinion, I came away, I was actually pretty positive after, probably the most positive about anybody after the game, just because I was like, good grief, they've got an amazing running back. They're uncorking big runs, and they did it against Iowa State too. They just didn't finish against Iowa State. That was the issue. They made the tweak with the red zone offense. We'll see if it sticks. We'll see. Yeah. But they changed something. Give them credit for that. It worked. Brendan Sullivan 4 snaps in the red zone and 14 points. So far, so good there. I actually think that takes a little pressure off Cade too. It's just one less thing he has to worry about. Just get him down there into scoring range and, let Brendan Sullivan take over. Anyway, I came out of it with more, and I'm not super worried about the offense. I mean, defense, I should say. Maybe I should be, but it's Phil Parker. It's Phil Parker, Seth Wallace, and a lot of pretty good cornerbacks that just lost a little eye discipline. And everybody's been victimized, Scott. Wampa, Schulte, Hall, Castro, even go down the list. Nestor, Entringer, they've all had their moments. Harris is about the only one that hasn't in that secondary. So anyway, haven't gotten to the question yet. Are they ready for Big Ten play? But just kind of rehashing the Troy here.
No, you're right. And, those are the things that I guess I try to look at it from a big picture perspective now. And I know you do too. It's easy to concentrate on the narrow deficiencies. Yes, this team has deficiencies. I don't know. I don't think they're going to win the national title this year. I'll go out on a limb here on that. But I do think that they still have the capabilities to be a very good team. Now, if there are some areas that they need to address, I think they did a nice job of that on offense week over week. I think they are building. Now, Can they maintain? Can they be consistent? That's a question that I think, really needs to be answered before, we put them in a category, whether they're playoff, category or not. But by and large, I look at the mistakes on defense, and those are the ones where you go, you know what? Who's your defensive coordinator? Oh, it's Phil Parker. Last year's Broyles winner? Yeah, that guy. Oh, okay. How often has he fixed the secondary? I don't know. Every year that he's been there. They have talent back there. They got in trouble. They had teachable moments. TJ Hall just had experienced 2 of them against a really fast receiver who might end up, he might end up in the NFL at some point because of that speed. I look at him and I think Amir Smith-Marset, maybe even a little faster. And okay, well, now you learn, you can't play this way, especially in not this game, but the next one. Ohio State will burn you if you do it. Wampa, I guarantee he's no longer going to let some slot receiver just run past him, the way he did against Iowa State. It sucks they lost. It sucks that happened. But if he learns from it and grows, they're going to be better for it. This is a good team. This is a good defense. I think they'll be fine. Punting wise, yeah, the coverage unit need to be better, but you know what? The punter needed to be better too. He didn't put it in a good spot, and he made it too straight. And I think Kirk was trying to save him a little bit by putting all the blame on the coverage team, but really this was a freshman kicker or punter that didn't do a very good job. Maybe the coverage unit needed to be better, fan out a little bit more, but I think his point was, you guys need to be better. We know he needs to be better, but he's still young and growing. So I don't know. That was a long way for me to say, I think that they're going to be okay.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I had on here, Scott. And maybe this is the same conversation, maybe not. But what an example of adversity that maybe concerns you? Okay, I feel like we're both on the same page that the defensive breakdowns are correctable. I would be shocked this week if they just give up 2 more 60-plus yard touchdown passes. I mean, they gave up 2 all last year. Plays of 60-plus. This year, they've already given up 3 in the last 2 weeks. So seems like a blip, but I don't know. What is? I guess let me phrase it this way: as they head into Big Ten play, Scott, what is the most concerning thing you see about either side of the ball right now?
I still have to. I was impressed by the way Cade McNamara in particular played the other day. You got to look at those numbers and think that's exactly what Iowa wants, is efficiency from your quarterback. He was 19 of 23. Brendan Sullivan was 1 of 1. 20 out of 24 passing is better than we've seen for years. Can he do it again? Because we saw it the week before. The final 3 quarters was 5 of 18 with 2 interceptions and 27 yards. I want to see consistency in the passing game. Because I do think that they're going to straighten out the defense. That'll be fine. It's just, out of their 5 touchdowns they've given up, 4 have come from big plays. 1 special teams, 3 on defense. There's only been 1 touchdown drive against them. That was by Iowa State in the 3rd quarter. So I think they're running the ball with tremendous ability right now. I think they've got a chance to be really good in this area. It reminds me a lot of what Sean Green did in his 2008 year. It just, and Caleb is, he's leading the country in in rushing yards. That's pretty damn impressive. So, but to me, it's consistency in the passing game. That'll be the determining factor for me, as to whether they are a good team. Everything's close with most teams, to a potentially very, very good team to where they're blowing out comparable teams. Yeah,
I don't know if you knew this, Scott, but McNamara's completion percentage in that game was the highest for any starter since C.J. Beathard back against, I think it was North Texas. I went all the way back. That's just wild. He just barely eked out a game by Nate Stanley against UNI in 2018. But it was the first time any Iowa quarterback had been over 70% since Stanley in 18. That's just crazy to think about. And we've talked about the completion percentage for this program has been horrible. Hasn't hit 60 since 2015. Good grief. maybe this is the year. They're above it right now. Cade's close to 64% right now. So obviously, what happened against Iowa State is still in our minds. What was it? 5 for 18. Yeah.
Final 3 quarters for 27 yards. I mean,
yeah. So that's the thing. That's the thing. Because now they face what is the 5th ranked defense in the country. Now, everything comes with an asterisk this early in the season. We don't know how good they are. But yeah, I guess I would share that concern, and I would take it just another. But I feel like that is still like a lot of things are in a pretty good place now. Like offensive, like running game wise, this is what you wanted to see. We haven't seen this in a long time. I mean, 2020 was the last time we saw a team run consistently like this. And just the big plays, Scott. The big plays to me are what really separate this, because that's what Lester wanted to do. And he's doing it. I think that's pretty remarkable 3 games in, because they did it against Iowa State too. It's against everybody. Yeah,
it's been against everybody. You've already got 7 25+ yard runs for Caleb Johnson. The mid zone that they introduced to this running attack has been a godsend. It's something they should have done a while ago, frankly, because what it's done. I talked to Connor Colby about it, and Logan Jones and a few others. Just what does it do for you as a blocker? And for Connor Colby's, like, instead of worrying about getting to the play side number when we're running stretch, now I have to get to the what he calls the screws, and that's the screws on the helmet. So your aiming point is it's a foot different, but as we know, that's an easier reach for them to get to. And when they're able to get there, it's faster, it's quicker, it's moving quicker than and then you look at Caleb Johnson when he's running stretch. That's maybe not something that he's best equipped to do, because he's got to be more patient and then find your hole a little bit wider. And when you've got a guy who's got his kind of, ability, but he's not necessarily a quick back, and I think he needs to just hit the hole hard. And it's there. It's quicker. It's called off tackle back in the old days. And then boom, he trusts it. He finds it. And he gets right through it. And that's why I think you've seen a lot of these runs. And even Kamari Moulton has done a really good job there. So, obviously, they went from 3.2 yards per carry to now, almost 6. Well, they won't keep it for the entire season. But if you're north of 4.5 in this offense, you're doing something. I mean, the last time they've done anything like that was 20. And before that, you've got to go back to like Sean Green. So if you're able to run for 4.5 to plus yards per carry in this offense, it's not just good. You're talking about elite good. And if they're able to maintain that for a season, this team will be dominating teams that normally that they would eke out wins against. Well, and I think one thing that I guess I just want to pipe in here, because it frustrates me a little bit. Just the way sometimes I see people, what they expect from the run game, I guess. I think sometimes people expect a good run game to get 4 or 5 yards every time. Mm-hmm. It's just not how it is. And if you can get these big plays, I mean, look at the NFL. You get stuffed all the time in the NFL. But the key is to crack those big runs. And so that's what I think is most fascinating about this Iowa offense is you're getting to 5.93 yards per carry right now. And that's a tremendous number. That's a tremendous number. And they're not giving up too many sacks right now either. So I don't know. I guess I encourage people to not get bent out of shape if there's a couple runs that get stuffed. Like, that's normal. That's normal. Sometimes someone misses a block, doesn't mean you have a bad run game, but the fact that they're busting these is really encouraging. And what I think it does, Scott, to give me a positive feeling for the season is that's something that's repeatable on the road. You can wear teams down, and we've seen it. You're wearing teams down in the second half. That's what happened the other day.
You know, Iowa State didn't quite get to the finish line there, but it's still, you know, they could have won that game 10 different ways with just one thing. So I think that's the other beauty of a run game, as opposed to maybe what Wisconsin's trying to do with the air raid and stuff. I think Iowa's formula can be really repeatable, especially late in the season when guys are tired, guys are hurt, and you're just leaning on them. That's what we saw in 08, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the Hawks just end of the season, they were just mowing down teams. I mean, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Minnesota. I mean, even beat Penn State. Yeah. We mentioned Minnesota. Yeah. And then, of course, South Carolina in the bowl game. So, you know, it doesn't mean everything's perfect, but I just like the formula, I guess, of having this type of run game. And Caleb is just, he's something special. Like, I watched DeAndre Swift for the Bears, and he sucks compared to Caleb Johnson. Like, DeAndre Swift can't break a tackle. And Caleb's like one of the top backs in the country of yards after contact. Mm-hmm. So it's speed and power.
You know, he has 18 runs of 20-plus yards in his career, 7 of which his high already is this year with 7. That's unbelievable thus far. I mean, you're looking at a running attack that's averaging 243 yards per carry. Last year, they averaged 115. You know, the offense averages 419 a game. Last year, 234, which was the worst in the Big Ten in almost 40 years. So you've got this, you know, these changes offensively that I think have really come to light. And this is something that I spent way too much time studying and writing about. But I went through every single play as far as what used motion and how the motion was affected here, and as well as personnel groupings. And, you know, one of the things that I thought was really fascinating was, you know, when Tim Lester came in, I looked at his personnel groupings with Western Michigan, and he used a lot of 11. And I'm like, oh boy, how are you going to incorporate that here? And then he's like, well, I love 12. You know, I'm going to run 12. You know, which is 2 tight ends. He says, I look at myself as a 12 guy, is what he said. And last year under Brian Ferentz, they lined up in 12 personnel 33% of the time and used multiple tight ends on 61% of their plays. That includes 13 or 14 or 23 or 22, you know, in a lot of running situations. So far with Tim Lester, it's 66.7%. 2/3 of the snaps are in 12, are in 2 tight ends, 2 receivers, 1 running back. It is by far the most dominant position in this, and 71% of the snaps include multiple tight ends because they've had some 14 plays, they've had some 23, that sort of thing. And I'm looking at those numbers going, you know, it should have been like that when Noah Fant and TJ Hawkinson were here. But the other part, and this is probably the biggest part, we talked a lot about motion and what motion does. And motion has been very effective, and he's almost surpassed the numbers under Brian Ferentz for the last 3 years in 3 games. I mean, and how much motion they used. And they haven't even really used it all that much, but over the last 3 seasons, I charted this, they totaled 124 running plays with motion at 4.7 yards per carry. However, Iowa averaged 3.2 yards per carry over that 3-year block. So it means that, hey, when we use motion, 4.7 yards per carry, that's good. 3.2, what are you doing wrong? Well, motion helps, right? Well, you know, this year they've used motion on 26% of their snaps. And let me look at the number. Well, I didn't chart all the. Well, I did. Yeah, I did. 4.35 yard, or wait a minute, that's for the last 3 years. 5 yards per carry is what they're averaging. 5.1 yards per carry is what they're averaging with jet sweep motion or just plain motion, and they're averaging 5.9 yards per carry overall. It tells you that this motion does kind of work. And Brian didn't like it. And, you know, and for a long time, it just gutted me because I'm like, this is working and you're not using it. It even works in the passing game because even with Deacon Hill, they were able to complete 18 of 29 passes with motion last year with Deacon Hill. This year, it's 13 of 19. So it's working. This is exactly what it's supposed to do. They just didn't do it, you know, before. So anyway, I'm kind of going in a different direction here, but I think it is relevant to this offense and the changes they've made, because if you're looking at, 420 yards of offense a game, and last year was 234, that's a 1 year wonder. I don't think anybody's given enough credit how much this has impacted.
Well, Game Day Men's Health continues to be a fantastic partner of Legends and Listeners and Iowa Everywhere. Fellas, it is time to get back in the game with Game Day Men's Health. Their testosterone replacement therapy can help you feel like you're in your 20s again. Low T is a real thing. It affects your mood, your energy, your sex drive, your athletic performance in a negative way if you have it. But if you don't, or if you can up your T, you don't have to settle for that anymore. You could do something about that with Game Day Men's Health. Get your free, private, no obligation consultation today. Check them out at GameDayMen'sHealth.com or call one of their locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, or North Liberty, and make sure you tell them you heard about them on Legends and Listeners, which is the best show on Iowa Everywhere. Take that, Murph and Andy.
Yeah, exactly.
So great numbers, by the way. What I feel encouraged about the offense where it is. I think the deep shots are what's next. Cade has only thrown 5 balls, Scott, 20 plus this year. And one of them was the Hail Mary. One was a scramble on a pass to Ortworth. He had the long pass to Gill for the touchdown against Illinois State. Missed the deep ball to Caleb Brown against Iowa State. That was a biggie. So he had no pass attempts of that length against Troy. And I did ask him about deep shots, and he said, he thinks they're there, but the run game is just working so well they didn't need to go to that the other day. Now that's his answer, obviously. It's true they didn't try him, so I guess that would be the next step, I think, for this offense heading into Big Ten play, which is what we're previewing. I think they're going to have to prove this week, Scott, that they're able to hit some of those, and I don't know yet if they can.
Yeah, they might need a couple of them, and they're definitely going to in the next game. Against Ohio State, you're going to at least have to show it a little bit, and that's going to be that's the next step in this next phase here with this offense, and at some point. What the good part of this is everybody's now fearful of Caleb Johnson. I listened to PJ Fleck. He was very effusive in his praise of Caleb Johnson and Iowa's. He's always had a lot of respect for the way Iowa and Kirk have built this program, because he understands that that's the same type of building he has to take at Minnesota, developmental, technically sound, do all the right things that way. And Caleb is a player that he knows can make a difference. What that means is everybody's going to look at 8 in the box. They're just going to have to. And yes, they may get their eyes displaced a little bit by some of the motion. They may screw up their run fits, but they're going to try to make sure that they have enough people in there to cover it in case that it's a 7-yard gain and not a 70-yard gain. What comes off of that is good play action. And then some of that is going to be deep. And it's got to be organic, unless you have a guy who has a great deep ball. And I would say Spencer Petras could throw a deep ball as well as anybody, not always accurate with it, but he could really sling it, then that's one. But, Caleb or Cade, I don't know, has that quite that kind of army. I know he doesn't, but it's going to be there. It's just a matter of deciding how you're going to do that. And it comes organically through the game. It's like, hey, they're expecting us to run this play. Instead of booting out of it, you drop straight back, and so they'll have some shots. And it looks like, Justin Wally, who's their best corner, is probably not going to play. We'll know for sure on Saturday. He's trying, but he's been a starter there for 4 years, and if he's not playing, there's going to be some room there. I mean, they've got some players on defense, but he's one of the better ones, and so I think that could be something that they could try to take advantage of.
Good analysis. Tyler and I talked on Hawk Central tonight or Wednesday night about this very thing, and I'm curious your thoughts on it. Is, how long do you expect him to stack the box? Like, how long do you keep pounding it in there, keep pounding Caleb Johnson if they're just going to load the box? I mean, we saw Iowa State later in that game, that's what they did do, and it worked. It worked against Iowa. He got a little bit of yardage, but after it was 19-14, Iowa had a tough time moving the football. I think it was, what did we say? It was punt, 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 Hail Mary, right? So, not a good finish to that game offensively. So, how long do you keep trying that run if it's not working on Saturday?
You have to keep it. You can't give up on it, even if they're stopping you early in the game, middle part of the game, late part of the game, because it's been there. And we've seen that even up there before in 16 when it was kind of a rock fight. And then Akram Wadley breaks one for 60 yards or whatever it was when it was 7-6 Minnesota. And then that was the last time they actually got a 2-point conversion.
I know. I was just going to say that. We're like the 2-point conversion experts. By the way, Brendan Sullivan should be the 2-point conversion guy now, right?
Exactly. He should be. He's right there inside the 5. But I think they missed 10 straight or something.
10. It was.
Oh,
that was so bad. Anyway,
it's terrible, man.
We always bring that up. But
anyway, with the running game, I do think you got to stick with it, because even if they're stopping it, that's what you built your offense on. And you're just going to have to force them to continue to stop it, because if they start to go, man, we got them, then they lighten up, then you nail them, and then they'll misfit, or you work a reverse around them, or a jet sweep, or you play action pass. There's just so much, but you have to make sure that running game is going to be there for them, and that's the player that they fear. So you want to strike fear in them, in each and every possession. Don't let them think that they've got you. But you also don't want to just, 1st and 10, it's 2nd and 9, it's 3rd and 8, and then, run a draw. You do want to diversify, a little bit.
Yeah, I wonder if this is a jet sweep game. We haven't seen that. I keep saying it's coming. We just haven't seen it yet. I'm surprised. I think one of the reasons for that, Scott, is kind of when I was doing the same type of research on Wednesday, and when they're running 12, they're just not getting 𝗀cie or Caleb Brown on the field very much, and those would be probably maybe your 2 most proficient guys on those jet sweeps. So curious to see if that maybe if they are loading the box, if a jet sweep maybe keeps them honest, just like you said. I mean, it kind of brings it full circle here. Like, that's what teams were doing against Iowa the last several years. And when they did the jet sweep motion, it was more effective. Except on the handoff to Ragaini when Northworth was the lead blocker up at Wisconsin. That was the one that didn't work. I love bringing up the old stuff we always bring up.
Oh my God, that play. I mean, Ortworth is going to be a really good tight end at Iowa, but for his first game as a true freshman, you don't have him go on 4th and 1 and try to block a senior outside linebacker on a jet sweep. It's just not that takes some brains. Let's have some common sense here. Just do something different. Anyway. Well,
speaking of old dudes, I know you've got a concert you want to promote, Scott, here for Iowa Everywhere. We got a big thing going on here at Hoyt-Sherman.
Yes, and on this show, you could win a pair of tickets to 38 Special. Yes, 38 Special is coming to Des Moines, and us, Chad and Scott on Legends and Listeners, have tickets to give away to 38 Special's November 24th show at Hoyt-Sherman Place. Enter for your chance to win. All winners will be selected on the October 3rd edition of Legends and Listeners. So general tickets go on sale on Friday, September 20th through Ticketmaster and at Hoyt-Sherman. But why do that? Why not just enter through the Iowa Everywhere website, or and we'll tweet out some links on this. And if you're like me, I'm an old rocker from the 80s, used to have a mullet and everything, and I love me some 38 Special. I saw them at Steamboat Days one year, and this is their Second Chance tour back in 93 or 4 or something like that. So this is a band that's near and dear to my heart. I wish it was happening a little closer to me, not on Thanksgiving week, but if you're in the Des Moines area, you got to go see them and tell me about it.
Yeah, crazy that they're coming here. That's awesome. And yeah, we get to draw winners on our show. That's a lot of pressure. So yeah, make sure you guys are entering, because we don't want to we want a lot of entries here. let's make it interesting. So yeah, make sure to do that. I'll tweet out something if I haven't already by the time you're hearing this about the contest as well. So Scott, let's talk about, just before we get into Big Ten talk here, a few minutes on just the stakes of this game. Man, I called it a must-win this week. I really think it is for Iowa. I mean, you lose this game, you go into the bye week, that's just not good. If you go into the bye week 2-2, going, facing Ohio State in 2 weeks, but you win this game, you're 3-1. You got a little bit, you're feeling good about yourself, maybe going into Columbus, maybe a little optimism. And then heck, if you take your lumps in Columbus, I mean, I don't see any reason why they can't win the rest. I mean, they would, if they can win this game, this is the type of game they got to win. Let's be honest. Otherwise, like you said last week, this could be a disappointing season. I think it's a must-win, Scott.
For sure. I agree wholeheartedly. If you don't win this game, this season can spin out of control very quickly for all those reasons he said. But first of all, you look at two of your most important rivals are Iowa State and Minnesota. Iowa State, obviously, in-state rival. Minnesota, oldest played rivalry, greatest trophy. You don't want to lose Floyd. There's a picture of Floyd there. I
photo by Scott Dochterman.
Yes. Yeah. I took that picture when I was up there about a month ago. And you don't want to lose Floyd again for the second straight year. It's 2-2 going into the bye week. You lose 2 rivalry games, 2 trophy games. With all the stakes here, if you can't beat Minnesota and Iowa State, going to Ohio State is a tall task anyway. Then you're looking at 2-3. Then your playoff opportunity is out the window. And so I'm not saying they're going to get there anyway, but I'm saying that you got to beat Minnesota, or at worst you should have beat Iowa State, and if you're going to lose to Minnesota. But I think this is a must win. I think this is, if you're a motivated team that makes very few mistakes, that Iowa is the better team. But if you make mistakes or don't play consistently on offense for sure, and don't stop the run on defense, then this is going to be a 4-quarter fist fight. And we've seen that over and over and over again between these two teams. And as we saw last year, there were some mistakes that happened, but last year is probably one. It's probably not to the level that I lose in the Iowa State game 2 weeks ago, but it's in the ballpark of worst feeling losses over the last handful of years.
Yeah, I think 12 yards in the second half.
Yeah.
12 yards in the second half. Minus three turnover margin.
God, it was yucky.
Yeah, it was an ugly game, and they almost pulled it out, crazily enough. If not for the clearly invalid fair catch signal, according to PJ Fleck. Now, he didn't say it like that, but he's like, we go over invalid fair catch signals all the time. And he kind of grinned at the end of his press conference. So.
I sat in a special teams meeting with those guys. They didn't mention it once.
There you go. Busted, Fleck. You're busted.
Maybe they just knew I was there, so they didn't want to bring it up and have me laugh. They were going over a bunch of little things, though. And I just kind of looking out of the corner of my eye at Paul, the SID, and just kind of like Rovnick and like, when's it coming? I wonder when it's coming. And it wasn't. But I had some conversations with the staff about that play. It's pretty entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, it's a night game. That's the other thing. Like, I mean, as a Bears fan, like I'm just like so scarred about primetime games. They never play well in primetime. I feel like if you're Iowa, you just don't. I mean, you just lost a game on CBS national TV. Go win one here. Go win one here on Big Ten Saturday night on NBC. Get that primetime win, and then honestly, that Ohio State game becomes a lot more interesting. I think just even nationally, like, hey, here comes a pretty reputable Iowa team into Columbus the week before Ohio State plays Oregon. I mean, I think you've at least give yourself some momentum going into that game. Like when when I did my preseason pick, Scott, I said, I can't remember if it was on this pod or mine, but I said, I've got Iowa going 3-1 in the first 4. I said, I think they lose either Iowa State or Minnesota. I don't know which one, but I think they lose one. And I ended up picking the Iowa State one preseason. And just because I thought they're probably just going to have one of those games against one of them. So I think this is the game where they do. I think they're going to put 4 quarters together, Scott. I think they're going to win this one.
I'm with you. I think that the signs are there for this team to take another step forward and play their best football game of the season. And that the most complete game, because they played well at times. I mean, Iowa State, the first half against Iowa State, especially if you remove the red zone issues, was tremendous. But and then the second half against Illinois State was great. And then last week, the second half against Troy. Well, put it all together. And this team has a tendency to galvanize on the road, kind of get out of Kinnick, get out of, and they love it, but it's also like there's 70,000 fans, there's a lot of pressure on them. This way, they're kind of like us against the world. And, they have chants there. Who hates Iowa? We hate Iowa, so they can kind of feel that and thrive in that environment. They've had success up there recently, let alone, all the way going back to 2014 was the last time they lost there. So I think Iowa, and if Iowa puts together a good performance in prime time, that's going to, if they play well offensively along with defensively, that's going to change some thoughts around the country too. And that they sorely need that. I mean,
they do. Yeah. That's a great point.
Because, the reputation of this team offensively has just been garbage for the last handful of years. But if they match their numbers, statistics, if Caleb Johnson runs for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns and they win 31-3 or something like that, and they look good doing it, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, Happy learned to putt. I was doing all right here. So, and then, you go to Ohio State and you feel like you've got a puncher's chance at least. Yeah. And they've had some good games there. The last one was not. It was terrible. But before that, when they've gone to Ohio State, that they've fought. And I think if they can put together a good game against Minnesota, to spend that next week figuring out some things, working on some things. Kirk has a tendency with the blue bloods to feel kind of the edge. You could see it on the Tuesdays when especially if they feel like they got a shot. Whether they're playing a Michigan or a Penn State or Ohio State, he's just got a different vibe about him, like a little more laser focused. So, but first you've got to go win Floyd back.
Got to win this one first.
Otherwise it's for naught. And then we're starting to talk about who's going to replace Kirk Ferentz, whether or not it's going to happen. It's just what the conversation will naturally gravitate towards.
Ooh, man, big stakes. These are big stakes. They really are this Saturday. Scott, before we jump into our Big Ten conversation, wanted to make sure to thank the good folks at Lonely Oak Distillery who are responsible for the smooth drinking experience of Steeple Ridge Bourbon. Steeple Ridge gives you a high-quality, delicious, drinking, award-winning pour of craft bourbon. If you don't find Steeple Ridge at your favorite retailer, ask for it by name. Steeple Ridge is distilled, aged, and bottled in Iowa, and we support local here on Iowa Everywhere. We're a local. We support. What's the word I'm looking for? We are local enthusiasts. We're enthusiasts about supporting local businesses. So thank you for Steeple Ridge, very loyal partner of Iowa Everywhere. Thank you very much. A lot of stuff going on in the Big Ten, Scott. Where do you want to start? I'll let you tee it up. You're Mr. Big Ten.
Mr. Big Ten. Really big game. I mean, we're going to cover a big one on Saturday, Chad, but nationally, USC at Michigan can really set the stage for the rest of the season for those two teams and a lot of what the discussion will be around the Big Ten. USC had a tremendous opener in beating LSU. I did not expect it to happen. I did not think it was going to happen, in part because of how the defense played. And then they went and had a really nice win against Spencer Petras-less Utah State. And now they're going to Ann Arbor. And before the season, I thought, oh boy, this is going to be tough. Well, Michigan has shown to be very vulnerable right now. I mean, they beat Arkansas State by 10 points. They won the opener against Fresno State by 20, but it was 23-10, and Fresno State was driving before they threw a long pick six, like a 90-yard touchdown and went the other way. So it was fairly competitive. And then, of course, Michigan gets rolled by Texas. I think this sets the tone for the conversation for Michigan. If they lose, forget it. They're done. And USC, it sets the tone for okay, this team has a chance to be a playoff team legitimately with one of the best quarterbacks in the league in Miller Moss. So that's what I'm looking at this week so far, Chad.
Yeah, definitely. That's certainly number one. But I would say number two, as far as matchups go this week, and we got some other storylines going on in the Big Ten, is the Friday night game, Scott. Two ranked teams from the old Big Ten West, the former Big Ten West. Number 24, Illinois. Number 22, Nebraska.
Yeah.
Dylan Raiola, man, he's good. I wish Caleb Williams was thriving as much as he is right now as a rookie QB here in the Big Ten. Now, obviously, they really, I wouldn't say they haven't played anybody. I mean, but they haven't played great defense yet. So be interested to see what Aaron Henry and Brett Bielema throw at the freshmen. Illinois is known for its defense. That's Brett Bielema's calling card. So both teams 3-0, a bit of a surprising 3-0, I guess you could say, or at least the way Nebraska's 3-0, I think is a little bit of a surprise. I think Nebraska's pretty good, Scott. They're favored by 7.5 or 8 points. I'm still pretty bullish on Nebraska right now. I think that's a really good team. And it gets me excited, too, because I would love that. Not that I'm like rooting for Nebraska to be good or anything, but I just would like that Black Friday game to have like major stakes. So if Iowa has a good season, Nebraska has a good season, that would be so much fun. But what do you think about this game? This matchup is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I guess I'll first say that when they set up Legends and Leaders, there was an anticipation that at some point Nebraska-Iowa would be a winner-take-all, and it's never happened in 13 years, and it certainly won't happen this year because of the way things shake out. But I love this game because Illinois coming out with that win against Kansas was really surprising to me because, Jalen Daniels just really, kind of screwed things up for them last year, and that cost them a chance to go to a bowl game, but they just didn't play very well. And I think with to be able to win at home against them, it gave them some new life. And, they blew out Eastern Illinois in the opener, and then they played really well against Joe Labus in Central Michigan last week. But this is kind of a statement game for both programs because Nebraska beat Colorado, but other than Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, what else do they have? I mean, they're very low level among the teams in the country. So I think that this is probably more important for Nebraska than Illinois because Nebraska wants to continue to roll and flex its muscles, and it deserves to, because I think, as you said, when you look at, maybe it's just the red number 15 and some of the side, his arm is unbelievable, and some of the sideways throw. He's special, no kidding. And so I think Dylan Raiola could be, with a piece that they're missing. Yeah. I also think Brett Bielema, they've had enough success against Nebraska in recent years. They're not going to go over there and say, "Oh, we surrender."
Yeah, right.
they're gonna thump.
Yeah. And what's interesting, Scott, and this gets into another Big Ten storyline here, is after the Illinois game, Nebraska plays Purdue and Rutgers. Now, Rutgers is improved. Mm-hmm. Purdue just got beat 66-7 at home.
That was
so great. So if they beat Illinois, there's a real chance, Scott, they would be 6-0 going into a game October 19th against potentially unbeaten Indiana, the Hoosiers. The Hoosiers. I think they're for real, Scott. I'm not going to say they're a playoff team or anything, but I think they're legit. That coach knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I don't know. Did you get a chance to see the game, or were you writing?
Yeah, I did. I watched the BTN and 60.
Okay.
I was impressed with Indiana.
Yeah, I was too. That was one of the games that I really highlighted on Saturday and was watching them. And 42-13, and first of all, I was really taken by the scene. I love the Rose Bowl. It's beautiful. And then you look at the baby blue and gold on one side and the crimson on the other and white, and you're like, wow, this is a beautiful scene. And then Indiana says, forget the scene. We're just going to kick the hell out of them. And that's what they did. They looked the part. And I think you got to give 𝗀cie𝗰𝗶𝗹 a lot of credit. He came in with a lot of bravado, but he has backed it up, not just by winning this game. I think UCLA might be the worst team in the league. It'll be between them and Purdue, but I think but they just go at it. And as you mentioned, they play Charlotte this week. They play Maryland, and then at Northwestern, and it could be 6-0 Nebraska versus 6-0 Indiana. That's interesting. I mean, that's as big of a game in Indiana, non-COVID, as I could ever remember since maybe 87 when they played. I think it was Michigan State for the right to go to the Rose Bowl. So strange things happen, but Curtis Rourke is a good quarterback.
Yeah,
and he's completed like 70 some odd % of his passes, 7 touchdowns, no interceptions, 4 touchdowns the other day. He's looked the part. He was at Ohio and now he's at Indiana, and he's as PJ would say, elite.
That's some of the good in the Big Ten. Some of the not so good, I would say. Tough development in Madison. Tyler Van Dyke, their quarterback, out for the year. That really seemed to torpedo any chance they had against Bama. Kennington texted me early in that game. He said, "Oh, it's about to get ugly," and it did. My man Kennington knows his SEC football. I mean I know circumstances change, but I'm not saying Iowa's going to beat Wisconsin for sure or anything like that. But that does change the landscape of Iowa's season a little bit too, that Wisconsin's back to the backup quarterback. They're coming to Kinnick. I mean, that's a game you feel better about now if you're a Hawkeye fan. And again, Luke Fickell, I mean, he just not getting off the ground here.
Yeah. This is, I really, I've come to this opinion that when you look at these two programs, a year and a half ago when Luke Fickell hires Phil Longo, and he got a lot of praise, like, oh, they're trying to do something different. They're trying to elevate their offense and all that sort of thing. And now you can see that sometimes your identity is beyond what the program, the coach, it really indicates. And you need to keep with that identity, because what was Wisconsin's identity? Physical power football, 350-pound linemen that are able to play slam ball, and then some awesome running back like Jonathan Taylor or Melvin Gordon, slicing you apart. And then, all they needed was a decent quarterback in some of those years, and they would have been borderline playoff team. And so when you remove your identity, somebody has to fill that vacuum. Who's filling it right now? Iowa. You look at Chicago. It used to be Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan State. Well, Michigan State's had some turnover, they vacated some of that spots. Wisconsin, well, they've turned it over. Now Iowa's picking it clean. They're getting all the players they really want out of Chicago. You're looking at on the field. They're vacating the physical style of football. So Iowa's able to grab the players that fit that. And so I think they vacated their identity, and they can get it back, but not with this style of play. Now, if you don't have your quarterback, and Braden Locke completed 50% of his passes last year, he's at 50% the other day. He's a 50% quarterback. You're not going to win many games and their schedule is not easy. They drew a short straw on that one.
Yeah, they got at USC next.
Yeah,
you get an off week, but good luck.
I mean, they're playing Penn State, they're playing Iowa, of course, they're playing Minnesota, as they always should and will do. But they've got a lot of tough games. They might not
get to a bowl game, Scott.
Yeah, it's realistic that they may not. I mean, they got absolutely annihilated. Jalen Milroe, to me, looks like he might be the best player in the country.
Yeah, he was better than I realized. Maybe he's improved a lot since last year, but
he has.
He's really good. One other quick thing is Washington losing at home to Washington State. Just something on my radar, just because that's another Iowa opponent. It just feels like, Scott, after Ohio State on the schedule, it just lightens up so much. I mean, it's not going to be easy by any means, but that's why this Minnesota game to me is so important for the Hawkeyes. Get over this hump this week. Prove you can win on the road. Prove you got a quarterback that can throw the ball, against a defense with a pulse, and, take your chances the rest of the season. You get an off week. They're healthy right now. The Hawks are pretty healthy. I mean, they're only down Leishon Williams and Seth Anderson. That's not bad for this point in the year. And, I don't know. It's you hope for everyone listening to this sake that are Hawkeye fans. You hope Iowa wins just so you can, have some positive mojo going into the rest of the season. Because otherwise, this is going to be a long season for us to cover.
No question. But let's say Iowa puts together its best game and wins by double digits. We'll just call it double digits. Feels good about itself. Looks like it's progressing. Gets a week off. Goes to Ohio State. I'm not going to pick a win. I'm not even going to pretend to pick a win. But what I'll say is, let's say that they have a good effort where they don't embarrass themselves. Like 2013 when they went there, they lost 34-24. You could just tell that Ohio State had better players. It was just that's the key. I mean, Iowa had its best shot, and Brandon Sheriff was the best lineman I've ever seen in a singular game. Just annihilated their defense, but they just fell short. If you could put together something like that, then you can look at the rest of the schedule, as you said, Chad. Washington at home, that could be number 200 for Kirk that day if they win against Minnesota. 19, they're at Michigan State. You're not scared of them. You look at Northwestern at home. Well, we know in the past, but you feel like you've got a good opportunity if you play well. Then Wisconsin, the way Wisconsin is playing. Then you go to UCLA. I think UCLA is not a very good team. You're off. And then you go to Maryland, and Maryland has not shown me enough consistency as a program to make me think that that's some sort of scary team to watch. And you don't know. And then finally you get to Nebraska, who I do think is pretty good. So you've got a chance, if they play the way that they're capable of playing, to go into that game 9-2 against Nebraska. And if you can get to that point in the season, you're in the playoff discussion. I don't know where you're sitting. And Nebraska very well could be in that discussion too.
Right.
And you've got a chance to Black Friday to be the biggest Black Friday we've ever had. And it's at night. So, right. It's going to be a little different environment, because I don't know how you felt, Chad, but with this whole Nebraska series playing on Black Friday, it always feels like everybody's got a Thanksgiving hangover. Mm-hmm. That it's just kind of like, there's been some high moments, but it always feels like, we're here. And now, but if you're talking about at night, then everybody's, got the turkey out of their system and they're ready to go. They've got to lather up the parking lots.
Long way to get to that, Scott. But as it just kind of comes full circle to how much importance is on this particular Iowa-Minnesota game for the Hawkeyes. Great show, my man. That was fun.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
See you up in Minneapolis.
Yes. Can't wait.
All right. For Scott Dochterman, this is Chad Leistikow. Legends and Listeners is with you every Thursday morning during football season here from the Channel Seed Studios and only on the Iowa Everywhere Network.